This episode is proudly supported by OpenTable.
Nearly 1/3 of diners are booking same day. So they're making those decisions on the spot. And 10% are making their bookings within just a few hours. And so it's why it's so important to have booking software like OpenTable, which allows your diners to discover you. And so when restaurants are on platforms like OpenTable, they're much more likely to be discovered. We help diners to connect to restaurants. Ultimately, having technology, using technology, helps you to reattach to those diners.
Experience the power of OpenTable. For an exclusive offer, visit restaurant.opentable.com.au/DITW. This episode of Deep in the Weeds is proudly supported by Deputy, rostering and timesheets without the usual chaos.
I had to make some life decisions, and one of them was like indulging late night drinking, late night eating, foods that I was eating, zero exercise. And, I just thought eventually I'm just going to have to move away from just being that sort of fried chicken guy.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Comfort food is much more than something delicious to eat. It transcends the bowl or plate and reaches into memories of our youth, of past feasts, and even forges new food memories too. It warms us to the core, makes us feel safe, and reminds us how much joy food can bring to the everyday. But how do you translate that comfort into a commercial setting? McGlone is the chef and owner of Sunday and founding partner of Bell's Hot Chicken. Morgan, how are you?
Good, thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. You've carved out a career with a real talent of being able to deliver nuanced comfort food. What's the challenges involved in doing that?
I just knew that I was never going to be like a Ben Shuri, Dan Hunter, or Rene Redzepi if I stayed in, fine dining type cuisine restaurant. So once I went to America and worked out that casual dining is very achievable, and if you follow a few easy steps, you can actually make one certain dish or many certain sort of fast food dishes, refine them and serve them in a great setting, which is kind of what we did with Bell's Hot Chicken and fried chicken. And just be proud of the fact that, I can still cook, and it's still great to be invited to cook, food in like restaurant style food, or, great dishes using great produce. But you do get pigeonholed, I guess, in a certain sense that, everyone kind of wants the fried chicken and the comfort food things. But like I said, it's still great to be invited, and it's still great to be asked to do these festivals sometimes, and without being asked to do the fried chicken, which is sort of like,
Even outside the realms of the fried chicken world with Bell's Hot Chicken, all of your food has this underlying depth of flavor and almost homely feel, even though it's quite refined. You're a third-generation chef. Tell us about the impact of food and what it was like for you as a kid growing up.
Yeah, well, I was born in New Zealand, and my earliest memories are nothing like, having a grandmother or nonna that cooked food. My mum and dad had a fish and chip shop in a small town in North Island of New Zealand called Tukuroa, and it was called Tiki Takeaways. And my dad was a trained chef. He was trained in the New Zealand Army, did city and guilds, and did all his training there. And my grandfather was a chef as well, chef fisherman. So he immigrated from Ireland. And my dad, very early on, he mainly cooked most of the meals growing up. But I do remember the fish and chip shop quite vividly, sitting on the freezer and eating chippies with probably too much barbecue sauce. And then the tomato ketchup in New Zealand comes in this like plastic tomato sort of squirting thing, like every New Zealand household has it. So it would have been that as well. And then when we moved to Australia, in the 1980, my dad sort of made a decision that he wanted to grow up. He wanted us to be home at night with us. So he was working at the Cronulla RSL in the bistro there for about 2 years. And then basically he just changed his vocation. He became working in construction and became a crane driver. And yeah, so like he wanted to be there for us at night, you know. And so cooking, we were really lucky to have some, you know, spectacular like food at night. Nothing like, you know, fine dining or anything, but like, you know, we grew up with quite a good array of food. Then when I remember my mum cooking the apricot chicken from Canton. That was a big favourite with the microwave rice. So we were really lucky to have an array of different types of food growing up. So yeah, and then we'd always go to our local Chinese restaurant on Friday night. You know, my dad would usually finish work and have a few beers with his mates, and then we'd all go to. I grew up in the Southern Shire, so we'd all go to either the Return Services League in Miranda, go to the Chinese restaurant there, or there was King One at the Cronulla Sharks League Club. So we were pretty lucky, you know. Australia was at that time, you know, pizza and things and Chinese and stuff. It was just like normal fare. So like there was no sort of like, oh, this is exotic or anything. It was just kind of normal, you know.
What lured you to start a career in hospitality?
Oh, mate, I thought I was going to be the next Sonny Bill Williams, but coming back, and they never had the impact players back in those days. So I was quite, you know, when it came to fitness, I was pretty lazy, but I was good for a good 10 minutes, you know, and that was sort of the change. I got to play with some really great, growing up in Australia. I got to play with like Adam McDougall and Nick Graham and Andrew Pearce, and like first grade. That was our team. I played for De La Salle Caringbah growing up, and you know we had a great team. Few Sharks came out of our team, but yeah, when I went to school in New Zealand for my last year and a half, and came back thinking that I was going to be the next Sonny Bill Williams, but I kind of quickly worked out that I didn't have the commitment to the fitness, and then I couldn't really work out what I wanted to do. So my dad said, "Oh, you should become a chef. You really like cooking, you know, you really enjoy cooking." I was like, "Oh no," but you know, they work on weekends and they work nighttime. So my dad invited me to go work with him and help him move some gyprock. And after 3 days, I was looking through the Daily Telegraph for the chef's apprenticeships, and I tell you what, it only took 3 days of moving gyprock to work out that I just didn't have that, you know, the physical acumen to be in construction. So my first apprenticeship, where I started my apprenticeship, was at the Summit Restaurant, which in the 90s was huge, man. We would do 400 Japanese for lunch on the buffet. If you were working on the buffet carvery, you'd have this carvery jacket, and you had to have this incredible carvery set. And I learned about like big numbers, like massive numbers. I was there for about 2 years, and then I went and worked for the Merivale Group at Cafe Merivale, Merivale's Cafe on Pitt Street, which was you know, where before they started having restaurants. Obviously, you know, John and Merivale, they had clothing shops. So this cafe was on the bottom. So I started through my mid-third year, I started working there. And then end of my third year, they were opening up Restaurant CBD with Luke Mangan and Lucy Allen. And I went and worked there for 2 years as finishing off my apprenticeship there, and then spending some time there before I went over to Europe. So I went to Europe in 97 for a year and a half, and then came back, and yeah, just Sydney was buzzing because we got the Olympics. Came back from Europe, went back and worked for Merivale at Slip In, which was cool. And then 1999, Luke and Mark Holmes, the chef, asked me to come and open up Salt with them. and that was a great experience. You know, during the Olympics, cooking during the Olympics. You know, it was incredible.
You've gone on to do the random events with Mark Holmes over the years and reconnecting with him. Do you have any stories of working with him at Salt?
Well, to be honest, man, like when I first started working for Luke in 1995, I mean, I still to this day, I learned so much when it came to butchery and making sauces. If I ever make a sauce, I make it the same way. It was just a genius way of, which is the Roux Brothers training method. So, you know, when we opened up CBD, I think that was Maryvale's first real restaurant in that building. First, within a month and a half, I think, you know, Terry Durack gave us a hat, and we got, you know, best new restaurant, and it was an incredible experience. Luke was in the kitchen every morning, making sauces, teaching me how to bone out oxtail and lamb rump, and you know, we basically, when you do an apprenticeship in Australia, you just kind of brush over these things, and I was very lucky for 2 years to work with Luke, and he was still very, very, very involved in the kitchen, very much inside the kitchen. He worked 7-8 shifts like everyone else. He was on the roster. Back in those days, there wasn't as many outside events or anything, so he was pretty much, that was his first sort of head chef job. So he's pretty much, you know, committed to that restaurant, and I was very lucky to have that training under him, you know. So I wouldn't. There's some things that people just don't learn these days. How to bone out poultry properly, how to bone out, you know, lamb rump properly off the bone. You know, nowadays you just kind of order that in, you know, cap on, cap off. And when we went to Salt, Luke was still heavily involved in the opening of Salt, but I think, you know, obviously his like stuff that he had to do with his commitments outside the kitchen sort of grew more and more and more, especially during the Olympics. I mean, you know, cooking on NBC and cooking at the Olympic Village and all those sort of things, that's very important for his business, you know. So like, I understand that more now. Like back then, you just didn't really get it. You just think, why aren't we in the kitchen more, or why isn't he in the kitchen more? But you even then in 2000, compared even more so today, but back then in 2000, how much it drove business for Salt during the Olympics, simply because of the reason we did the cooking episode with Matt Lauer and Katie Couric during the Olympics at the Olympic Village, which was crazy. You know, like, I understand that now, having my own business, you know, you have to do these things, which is kind of like a necessary evil at times. And if you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So it's still going to go on without you. So, you know, I was extremely lucky, and especially working with Mark Holmes. Man, he was just sort of someone that was never really happy with how good things were, and he'd think this could be better, this could be more refined, this could be better, this could be more refined. And to this day, I still use a lot of his sort of thinking on, you know, dishes, because things can sometimes be better. Sometimes we should just leave them alone, but like sometimes they can be more refined and they can be a lot better. So he taught me a lot about that. There's always opportunity to make things better. So yeah, that was the great lessons I learned from Mark Holmes.
At an early age, you set off to the US and started your own catering and chef agency in LA and New York. Do you have any stories of that time?
Yeah, I mean, look, I got a job during the Olympics. I kind of met this girl, and I thought it was like love, but it really wasn't. I probably liked her more than she liked me. And basically, I went and took this job. Marty Bowett's got me a job with this family in New York as a private chef. And I went and worked a year and a half with that family all the way through. And towards the end of that time with them, I met this Australian Lincoln who had he had a production company, and he wanted me to do some catering for him on some little film shoots and stuff. But like, you know, this is the crazy thing about America, is like I'll be cooking for the family during the day, and then he'd say, "Oh, we've got a little dinner party tonight with Steven Spielberg and this and that." It's like, oh my God, like, these things happen. Well, these things happen more and more in Australia now, obviously, because we're obviously a country where people like to film things, and of course, the people have finally worked out that we've got great places, locations, and stuff that we can film movies and stuff. Back then, 2001. So it was pretty insane, like, to have that, cooking for those sort of people. Being a private chef for a very, very wealthy family was an interesting experience. Would I ever do it again? Absolutely not. I mean, I was never treated badly, but like, it's just, it's kind of hard to work for a family. It's like it's kind of arduous where I was only cooking for 2 people and very structured lifestyle. But yeah, it was a learning experience. I mean, you learn how to work with yourself. I was working usually with a brigade of chefs, and then all of a sudden I'm just working by myself. So it's a lot of time to think about what you really want to do with your life. And I enjoyed my time. The first in America was definitely a build up for the second, but like, yeah, it was a good time.
Well, the US has had a huge influence on the direction you've taken as a chef, and you briefly alluded to that second visit that you had, which was a really huge move to move to Nashville and work with the likes of Sean Brock. What was it like at Husk?
Look, man, I got to thank Mike Eggert. Got a big shout out to Mike Eggert about putting me in the sort of eyesight of working for Sean. My brother and I, we had a small French bistro in Paddington called Flinders Inn for a hot minute. And to be honest, man, I kind of came back from Europe, and I thought like everyone would want to eat French food, but it was kind of the sort of era in Australia where there was more gels on plates and foams, and Mark Restaurant was like, it's getting 17 out of 20 for a lunch special, Friday lunch special menu, which I was completely out of my depth. There was nothing I was selling that was new. There was nothing that people wanted. I kind of worked out that, like, oh man, people didn't want heavy butter sauces. It wasn't sort of on trend at that time. And then you had like, restaurants like Mark, and then you had places like Duke, which were like just kind of like free-spirited restaurants doing crazy, weird combinations, and with great wine lists and great vibe. And I just I missed the boat on all that sort of thing, So I sort of questioned, maybe there's something else out there I can bring back to Australia. I had no intention of working for Sean Brock. Initially, I was going to work at a restaurant called L2O, a restaurant, the chef's name was Laurent Gras. And I rode away to Laurent Gras, and he had just got his 3rd Michelin star, and the next day he resigned. So he basically said, look, I won't be there. And I said, oh, well, my friends told me to get in touch with another chef called Sean Brock. And he goes, look, man, if you want to do something new and exciting, the food that Sean Brock's doing at Husk in South Carolina is by far, elevating the farm-to-table movement and working with all the food from the South. To be honest, man, the only food I knew from the South was like barbecue ribs and fried chicken. That's all I thought it was. Like, I was that, like, kind of oblivious to it's actually more than that. So I rode away in March 2010, and 2011 they said there's a position for a 1-month stage. Please come and join us. So I went in April 2011, and within 2 weeks I was so enamored by the way they did things and the way that Sean ran the restaurant and the kitchens that I asked for a job. I still had a visa to work in America. It was going to expire in a year, so I thought at least I have a year. And Trisha, my partner, she was wanting to work for Jordan Khan in LA. So it kind of made a chance for us to have a fresh start, especially after having a restaurant that didn't work out. It was kind of embarrassing, you know what I mean? Like I was kind of embarrassed that, we'd sort of talked a big game in Australia and we didn't follow through. So I did my stage and then I got a job and started. I was there in April. I started officially in June. And I worked with Sean until the 2014. Start of 2014, I came back. I finished my position in Nashville as the head chef. I worked at Huck in Charleston and then he offered me the job as the head chef in Nashville. And of course, you don't say no. It's like, at that time, Sean Brock was one of the biggest chefs in America. And I was extremely, extremely lucky to even be considered. So I obviously took the job. And that was after working at Huck in Charleston for 19 months and then going to run a kitchen in Nashville. It was pretty out there. Like I was completely out of my depth. Like running a restaurant in America is so different to running a restaurant in Australia. The way it's structured, the work ethic of some of the chefs in Australia. In America. The chefs that we have, the system and the way we work in Australia is by far the most arduous and most rewarding. I think that we create, if you're very focused and dedicated to a chef or a mentor, you can come out and work anywhere in the world because the way we run our kitchens in Australia is so different to everywhere else in the world. For example, like cooks in America, they have all their prep done for them. They have prep cooks, usually from Mexico or Guatemala, who pretty much do everything for them. And in saying that, like, they just, I don't say they don't work as hard. The services are longer. I would say that. And you do so much more people. Like, Husk would be doing, during the week, probably like Monday to Friday, doing lunch and dinner, 700 covers a day. And then, and then on the weekend with brunch, it goes up to 1,000. And you kind of need a back of house team to, help you sort of make sure you can get all that sort of prep done. It's super hard being able to do that on your own.
Are there any dishes or ingredients from your time working with Sean Brock that really sort of epitomise, what you were learning there?
Oh yeah, everything to do with corn. Corn was a huge ingredient used throughout Sean's kitchens. Basically, I never knew that you could be utilizing so much corn like that. In the form of grits as well. Obviously the staple dish in the South is shrimp and grits. That's kind of a staple dish. You've got, we were very lucky. We worked with, especially in Charleston, there was a type of pig that was introduced to the South called Ossibor pigs. So they were very, very incredible, almost like a Mangalitsa pig, like lots of fat, huge lardo, but they had long snouts. So to forage for acorns and dig into the ground. So over time, their noses had gone quite long, almost like an aardvark in a sense. But yeah, so we would use a lot of local animals. So yeah, that was pretty big. Lots of amazing. We created relationships for supply with the Amish in Indiana when I was in Nashville. The Mennonites, who they're kind of like Amish light. they can have mobile phones and motorized buggies, horse buggies. So we worked a lot with those guys, and they would grow incredible produce. The soil that they were, they had on their land was insane. It was just, there's so many products. Fermentation was a massive component of Sean's food. Different vinegars, different ferments. All our hot sauces would be fermented in Pappy Van Winkle barrels, which are, if you don't know Pappy Van Winkle, it's probably the most famous bourbon in the South, or in the world actually. So we would ferment our hot sauce in those. We would make crazy vinegars like Mountain Dew vinegar, which was incredible. Sarsaparilla vinegar, all different vinegars. Like the ferment program at Nashville was quite big. And then just, the actual different topography. So Charleston, because it was a coastline town, a coastline city, we would get a lot. The weather wasn't so cold. It'd get down to probably like 0 degrees, but nothing below that. Whereas Nashville, which is kind of near the Smoky Mountains, very, 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 very inland, we get snow and black ice, and that means like Charleston, you could still get great vegetables during the winter there, whereas Nashville would be a lot of gourds, a lot of brassicas, a lot of turnips, pumpkins, all those sort of things that only grow in that sort of climate. So it was a bit different, more hardier. The dishes were a lot hardier. A few more braising items. So it was completely different to either one or the other. You know what I mean?
This episode of Deep in the Weeds is proudly supported by Deputy, rostering and timesheets without the usual chaos.
Hospitality is where Deputy was born. This is the industry we have pledged to help thrive. Hospitality thrives with Deputy because of the great people management we bring through easy rostering, timekeeping, and communication. And that's just the start. We're innovating with so many new things that I believe that we will make hospitality thrive even more than it did before the pandemic.
For more information, go to deputy.com. You mentioned that you came back to Australia in 2014, and it was during those early stages where the idea of Bell's Hot Chicken came about. Tell us about that time, and it really created a movement of fried chicken in Australia in a way.
Yeah. Look, I came back and obviously, I kind of knew that I couldn't open a southern restaurant and have legs, but maybe I could find a common medium where there's got to be something that everyone kind of enjoys. It's a guilty pleasure, but maybe they won't feel that it's, maybe they'll feel that they can have it a couple of times a week if we make it refined. And then it was all about having incredible sides with it. So a lot of the hot chicken restaurants that I ate at and where I got some ideas from and for the recipe, they'd have amazing chicken and terrible sides, or shit chicken and great sides. So we really only had to really just kind of have a few sides and make them really well. And we kind of used that whole Japanese mentality where let's not have a huge menu and just do a few things really well. And if people, and obviously that kind of stopped us from having a not as big of a market that at first, right? Because people couldn't, they wanted certain things a certain way. And I just said, look, this is all we do, and we want to do it well. If you don't like it, we can't really serve you, and we're not going to change it. We're a bit more dogmatic at the start. I wouldn't change anything. This is, if you're coming into our house, this is, you go to someone's house, you don't say, oh, I don't I don't have it like this, I have it like that. It's like, hey man, this is what it's about. So we kind of sat like that. And then the wines that we serve are kind of different. I've always been into kind of natural wine, and I've always been into draft beer. You know, one of our first slogans was draft, not craft. We were like, you know, like just kind of like, you know, great Australian beers. Like in Sydney, we sell Resch's. In Melbourne, we sell Melbourne Bitter. And, you know, like that's kind of like magnums of Melbourne Bitter with, you know, we got a large format Melbourne Bitter would be like a 750 long neck, you know. So we were just, that's kind of what we did. And then we were lucky enough to get an incredible bourbon allocation. So we were serving like Pappy Van Winkle in a fried chicken restaurant. And then people were just like freaking out. Like, how do you guys get Pappy Van Winkle here? But, you know, I have to thank Sean for that. He put in a good word. But, you know, we just sort of like, this is what we did, and we weren't going to change it. And obviously later on we kind of, you know, obviously after a few years, people were like, yeah, I like it, but I wish they just had this. Oh, I wish they just had that. So we just sort of started asking for suggestions. Like one of them was this chicken sandwich, which is now something that I've cooked all around the world at Noma, in Japan, in America, you know, and that wasn't on the original menu. I didn't want to do a chicken sandwich. I mean, and then I thought, like, well, what's the best chicken sandwich in the world? It's a fucking zinger. So let's just make a better zinger. Let's make a better zinger. So I guess some ideas were really cool to like work on and get out there. But yeah, essentially at the start, we just did what we did, and we weren't going to budge. And I you know, even behest of my partners were like, oh, it'd be really cool if we did this. I said, nah, not doing that. No, I'm not doing this. This is what we're doing, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, Bell's was kind of like, I guess it was one of the forefront people of that sort of like dude food movement, you know, where people were just doing, and a lot of them were just chefs that like kind of just had enough of, you know, doing fine dining, you know, like doing those, you know, huge hours. And then people just getting upset of, you know, a lot of people didn't want to do degustation menus anymore. They just wanted to be a quick fix, in and out. And that's kind of that's sort of where we wanted to fit in the market. Is, you know, we're not your you know, your big night out with your partner, but it could be a few of your mates coming for a few bottles of wine and some fried chicken. That's kind of like we kind of wanted to sit in the market. We weren't offering a coursed out meal. You were literally either getting a bucket of chicken or a sandwich and chicken or something like that. It just basically that's kind of where we wanted to be in the market. So, yeah.
Well, what makes a great fried chicken?
I mean, look, man, I think there's the easiest steps that people sort of is obviously the oil you fry in. I kind of like cottonseed or canola oil. The chicken, I feel that chicken on the bone is the best way, like a wing or a drumstick or a Maryland with a bone in. After you get to skinless, boneless chicken, you're never ever going to achieve a crust, which is something like if you have a cheat meal and it's fried chicken and you get tenders, I mean, it's just kind of, it's not really a cheat meal because you haven't eaten the skin, you haven't indulged in the skin. So like for me, I think like, you know, good fried chicken has to have skin, has to have bone. You have to brine it beforehand. And then it's all, you know, you can buttermilk dredge but I also feel that it's your breading mixture. And I think, you know, I use a mixture of starches. I use rice flour, potato starch, tapioca starch, besan, and plain flour. And plain flour, just because it lightens up your breading. And then it's just different spices like ground ginger, cinnamon, mace, ground bay leaf, and onion powder, garlic powder. And there you got 6 things that can just sort of transcend your fried chicken breading from kind of average to kind of better than normal.
Well, as you mentioned, Bell's Hot Chicken really was part of the movement of quality sort of experiences with fried chicken in Australia over the last decade, and it grew substantially with sites across the country. Yeah. But you've decided to step away. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, a few years ago, man, I lost a lot of weight. I mean, I was nearly tipping 200 kilos, and I had to make some life decisions. And one of them was like indulging late night drinking, late night eating, foods that I was eating, zero exercise. And, like I just thought eventually I'm just going to have to like move away from just being that sort of fried chicken guy. You know what I mean? I just, it just got to a stage after 7.5 years that I was looking for something different. And then I was very lucky to meet my partners at Sunday. The food just was right up my alley. Rotisserie chicken, which I still love chicken. Free range, which is something that we could never do for the price point at Bell's. And then, just the sides, more vegetables, more fresher items, a lot more salads. And that's kind of sort of the ethos we've kept with at Sunday. And that sort of really sort of plays into my lifestyle now. Like I've never been healthier. I'm doing yoga all the time now. I'm watching what I'm eating. I've got a child, so like I'm not young. So like I'm an older father, in my 40s, having a child. It's a bit different when you're in your 30s. And I kind of, I'll be 66 when he's 21, and I kind of want to be there. So like, I think it's going to be, I think I'm going to have to make a few changes in my life to do that. And, food intake and what I was sort of eating was one of them. But then also what am I spruiking as well? Like I'm spruiking this sort of living this healthy lifestyle, and then I'm frying chicken. It just sort of, the journey came to an end, and I think my partners wanted to go in a different direction, and I wish them all the best. Like they want to grow, in a different model, and I think it's great. It's in great hands. They've got a great team over there now, and there's no bad blood, there's no animosity. It was just time, for both of us. We had new direction in the business. I sort of stepped out of the business since the first lockdown, and they just basically said, look, if you want to come back, it's changed, and it wouldn't have been the same for both of us. So it was just good timing. I think it was good timing. We both wanted to have a change. We're changing in our direction, and I just think Sunday for me is such a better. I feel it's a better direction, and my lifestyle sort of suits it.
Tell us a bit about the cooking that you're doing there. Is there a dish or two that you really love at the moment that sort of exemplifies where you're at?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I couldn't get away from the spice, but I'd been working on this sort of, I love Nando's. I grew up eating Nando's, and peri peri chicken for me is like, so we found, we just, during this last lockdown, I came in with the boys. I kept my boys on, we kept them working. We stayed open doing takeaway, but we would have these sort of like insights of what do we want to do in rotisserie chicken, because we're predominantly rotisserie chicken. What do we want to do that's kind of, we come up with these weekly specials. So like, refining the chicken Kiev, which I love chicken Kiev, but I used to eat it. I think it was like bird's eye chicken Kiev. I think that's the sort of shit I grew up with. So I researched like the best chicken Kiev, how to make chicken Kiev. I hadn't made it since, TAFE, and we were selling those sort of things. So like, it's sort of a wholesome place. I really love our exploration into, finding ways to utilize the vegetables on the rotisserie. So we have a half roasted cauliflower. I know everyone does cauliflower, but like over rotisserie, I think it's kind of cool. And we just get a really cool flavor of it. And I love the sort of stuff we do with, and our roast vegetables as well. Like, Australia has such a funny relationship with roast vegetables. We just they're either really burnt, or you've got like stuff that I think doesn't really belong in roast vegetables. I mean, zucchini and squash. Like, we were doing that at the start because we thought we want to see some color in there. But essentially, squash is like made up of 90% water. So all the roast vegetables, we'd spend all this time roasting beautiful potatoes and carrots and Brussels sprouts and pumpkin and sweet potato, just to have them end up being super soggy because of the squash, because we wanted added some color in there. And that was kind of like an eye-opening experience, like just saying, oh shit, we should just do 5 things well and have them at their optimum roast pumpkin, optimum roast sweet potato, carrots and corn and stuff like that, as opposed to having like squash, so because it aesthetically looks beautiful. And because most charcoal chicken restaurants or rotisserie chicken restaurants, it's eye-catching. You got to have something that's eye-catching when you walk into that salad or roast veggie sort of that display unit, So actually we got rid of the display unit because we just said, you know what, like, we want to be we want to kind of innovate, sense that, like, those salads sit there way past the required or the allowed time that you're meant to have them there. I think it's up to 3 hours. Trust me, the salads stay there longer than 3 hours. So we just thought, like, if we're just doing such a precise menu, why don't we just retrain our clientele into saying that, like, we're still doing the vegetables, we're still doing this, we're still doing that, but it actually just comes fresh to you instead of like left in the display. So, now our salads, which I'm really, really proud of, I'd love to say we work with local farms and all that sort of stuff that I learned at Husk, but I think, our veg supply will tell us if something's great in season, plenty, bountiful, beautiful, flavor's good, as opposed to trying to champion a couple of farms that I think other restaurants like Tim William or Fratelli, they could really, really champion them much better. So yeah, like, I think our salads are great. We're always working on new dishes, which is really cool. We just started working with Verduna Meats, which is a small, as well as Vic's. So we work with Vic's as well. But Verduna, we do get some great porchetta from them, which they make for us. We throw on the rotisserie. So I really like the porchetta that we do as well, which we sort of do from Friday to Sunday as a sandwich in a roll. I love porchetta rolls. I still love it, like, cut quite thick and maybe with some apple sauce and some beautiful Brussels sprouts and stuff. But I also like it in a sandwich. I think it's porchetta rolls. I don't think you can beat a better roll. Great with the crackling and all those good things.
What do you love about what you do?
I love now more than ever, because obviously, like, I got a child, so I don't work a lot of nights. This Friday we're doing a special thing, which I normally don't do, but because Jenna Hensworth, who's a great, I don't know, can you say mixologist? Like, she just does great cocktails. She did a lot of work with the Swill House Group, and she's a great chick. She did all our beverage lists. We're doing a special night with her, and I still enjoy doing those things. But man, working nights now in your 40s, it's just, dude, I don't know how chefs do it. I don't know how chefs do it after they're 50. So I love getting things ready and knowing that I can now just leave it for the guys to, they've got to work it out. I can't be there all the time. And, I kind of let that go after the first lockdown. I just thought, like, you know what, you can't be there all the time. And people have to, just like when, just when Luke wasn't there and I had to work it out, you have to train people to do this. So I love training people. I love seeing people, going further. I love seeing, one of my guys who worked with me at Bell's, he's trying to get his PR, and unfortunately or fortunately, he's going to go to the regional. He's going to go to Newcastle and work with Joel Humphreys up there, who's an amazing chef. I'm just so happy. He worked for me for 6 years, and I'm just so happy to see him progress. Like from Bell's Hot Chicken, frying chicken for 3.5, 4 years, to coming working at Sunday now crushing it Sunday, and then unfortunately due to, he has to go and get his PR, and there's nothing we can do about it. But now he's going to go and work for a great chef in Joel Humphreys, and I'm so stoked for him to do that. I know there's a massive chef and staff shortage in Australia, but I'm just so stoked that he's going to go out and work with another really great chef, and that's exceptional. And I love seeing that progression in chefs. I came from an era where people get really, really upset when you leave and don't talk to you and don't they just forget all the hard work you did for the time that you were with them, and they're just so fixated on the fact that they feel that sometimes it's more about an inconvenience of their lifestyle. It's not a fact that and instead of saying, oh man, let's get you the best position, or let's get you the best job, where you're going, let's get you ready to move on. And so, sometimes when things don't work out, they're never coming back if you treat them like shit. They're never coming back. They'll just say fuck that, I'm not going back there. Whereas if you treat people properly, man, when I left Husk, I was a head chef at Husk for 14 months, but I'd worked for Sean for 3.5 years. Man, the way he treated me on the way out was so excellent. That sort of changed my perception. You don't have to be an asshole. Yeah, you don't have to be an asshole when someone leaves. You can be a really, really, really good person, and we've remained friends, and he always checks up on me and always asks me how I'm doing, and always really proud, and just says things like, oh man, I'm so happy that you're doing what you're doing. I've taken things from Husk and used them at Bell's and now at Sunday. Of course I have. It was a big part of my training, and things I know that they are very successful because he is a successful chef, and he sees it more as that things being passed on to good people, then being passed on again and passed on again, and I'm really thankful for that, those lessons, So for me, the thing that I really enjoy these days is teaching people and learning from staff, and just trying to keep a business rolling.
Well, Morgan, I know there's so many more stories that we could share, and your influence is unbelievable. I've had the pleasure of eating in many of the restaurants that you've cooked at that we didn't even get a chance to talk about. So perhaps we can catch up again in the not too distant future. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Huck, man. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for having this podcast, man. I've listened to a few of them, man. It's really, really good. Thank you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.